3,000 years ago, in the holy city of Jerusalem, King Solomon built a magnificent temple. In it was said to be the most holy object on earth, the Ark of the Covenant, containing the 10 Commandments, the very stones God gave Moses on Mount Sinai. According to the Bible, the Ark had unimaginable supernatural powers.
In ancient times, when anybody came in contact with the contents of the Ark, bad things happened to them.
But then, mysteriously, the Ark and the stone tablets disappeared without a trace. What happened to them, and where they might be today, remain among the Bible's greatest mysteries. But now, one man thinks he has the answer.
I'm absolutely sure that I know where the contents of the Ark are.
Jerusalem, the heart of the Holy Land, the soul of the Western world. The golden dome of the rock dominates this sacred city. It is one of the holiest shrines of Islam. From here, the Prophet Muhammad is said to have ascended to heaven. And for thousands of years, many have believed this was also the site of King Solomon's magnificent temple. The last place on earth the Ark of the Covenant and the stone tablets were ever seen.
And they shall make an ark.
With these words, God commanded the children of Israel to build a chest to receive the 10 Commandments.
And thou shalt put into the ark the testimony which I shall give thee.
Its awesome powers are the stuff of legend. Bolts of lightning and plagues, leveling mountains and laying waste to entire armies. The Bible tells us God gave Moses precise specifications for building the ark. Its contents, the 10 Commandments, were said to be the only physical object ever to pass directly from God to man. From Moses to Solomon, the ark remained the most sacred symbol of the Jewish faith, while its great powers led the children of Israel to victory after victory in battle. Solomon built the first great temple of Jerusalem to house the ark. And it was here, in the temple's inner sanctum, the Holy of Holies, that the ark remained until it vanished, literally, from the Bible and from all historical record. Mike Saunders is a biblical scholar who has spent half a lifetime searching for evidence that events in the Bible can be reconciled with historical fact. And now, Saunders believes he knows the fate of the lost ark and God's 10 Commandments to the children of Israel. Over thousands of years, there's been endless speculation and theories by archaeologists, biblical scholars, treasure hunters, and crackpots, all claiming to have solved the mystery and found the ark. Perhaps the most intriguing theory involves Solomon himself. The legend begins with the beautiful and powerful Queen of Sheba, ruler of Ethiopia, who journeys to Jerusalem to meet the King of Israel. She's heard of his legendary wisdom, and yet, meeting the great king, she is spellbound. They fall in love. But it would be a star-crossed romance, their passion in conflict with their sovereign duties. Before she left Ethiopia, Sheba vowed to return to her homeland, to her people, and to her throne. Obligation won out over desire. It is on her journey home that their son Menelik is born. When Menelik turns 20, Sheba sends him to meet his legendary father. For Menelik too, meeting the great king is a revelation. Even legend proves inadequate to the man who welcomes him so warmly, the father he never knew. Menelik is in awe of the great king. And yet, all too soon, he must make the return journey to Ethiopia as well. To assure his safety, Jerusalem's temple elders send their firstborn sons as escorts. It is only once the caravan has journeyed deep into the desert that his guardians reveal their secret cargo. Unbeknownst to Menelik, his caravan is carrying the holiest of artifacts, the Ark itself. Convinced it is God's will, Menelik continues the journey to Ethiopia, where many believe the Ark remains to this day in the Church of St. Mary's in the village of Axum. A second prominent theory has a group of renegade Israelites in a religious dispute fleeing with the Ark to Elephantine Island in the Nile, where they build their own temple and Holy of Holies. 2 centuries later, a war breaks out between the Israelites on Elephantine and the Egyptians. The temple is destroyed and the Israelites depart with the Ark. Some say they took it to Ethiopia. Some say they returned it to Jerusalem. Some say they did neither. And still other theories involve legends that harken back to the time of the Crusades, when knights in shining armor ventured to the Holy Land in the name of Christendom to battle the Muslim conquerors, known as infidels. It was the time of King Arthur and the Round Table, of Robin Hood and Richard the Lionheart. It was also the time of a mysterious and mystical order known as the Knights Templar, who were said to use the Crusades as a pretense for finding the Holy Grail and the Ark. One account has the Knights marching on Jerusalem in 1119 AD, where it is said they dug under the Dome of the Rock, but found nothing. And yet the story is also told another way, that they actually found the holy relic beneath the Dome of the Rock, transported it back to Europe in total secrecy, and have kept it hidden deep beneath the Cathedral at Chartres ever since. Still others say the Ark will be found on the Jordanian banks of the Dead Sea, not far from the location of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Some actually believe the legend according to Indiana Jones, a snake-filled well of souls in the Egyptian desert. Still others believe it was buried under Temple Mount to hide the sacred Ark from Israel's enemies. A site sacred to 3 faiths, this would be the battleground between Muslim invaders and the forces of Christendom on crusade. Ron Wyatt, a self-proclaimed archaeologist, claimed to have seen the Ark here in 1982, but died before revealing his evidence. And now, Mike Saunders has a new theory. He picks up the trail in the Bible itself.
What is quite startling is that there is nothing in the Bible that explicitly says that the Ark disappeared. It seems to just fade from history, but there are clues, and very important clues.
According to the Old Testament, 5 years after the death of Solomon, an Egyptian pharaoh known as Shishak invaded the Holy Land and held Jerusalem to ransom. In return for sparing the city, Shishak demanded all the treasures in the kingdom of Judah.
Shishak comes to the edge of this kingdom with a vast army of 60,000 foot soldiers and 1,200 chariots. And he sends his emissaries ahead and says, I control totally your country, I will leave you alone, give me all the treasures of your temple and all the treasures of your palace.
According to Saunders, to spare the holy city and to save their lives, the people gave Shishak everything, including the treasure of Solomon's temple.
And all means all. It is absolutely certain that Shishak took all the treasures of the temple, and all means the Ark of the Covenant and the contents of the Ark.
If Saunders' interpretation of the Bible is correct, history has been looking for the Ark in all the wrong places. But if Shishak took everything, including the Ark, what did he do with it? And who was the Egyptian pharaoh the Bible calls Shishak? If Mike Saunders is correct, if the Ark of the Covenant was taken from King Solomon's temple by the Pharaoh known in the Bible as Shishak, then Saunders must discover who Shishak was and what he did with his sacred plunder. There's only one place to start looking: Cairo. The world's greatest collection of ancient Egyptian relics is found here in Cairo's Egyptian Museum. Saunders has come in search of clues. What would a conquering pharaoh like Shishak have done with the loot from his Israeli campaign? These small ceremonial stone tablets were discovered beneath the foundations of ancient Egyptian temples. In that custom, there could be a clue. Known as foundation deposits, they might shed light on what Shishak did with the treasure he took out of Israel. An expert on foundation deposits is the former director of the museum, Mohammed Saleh.
The foundation deposits are the objects or the artifacts which the ancient Egyptian kings, from the beginning of the history, were putting under some places of construction. Whatever you find in the foundation deposits, you find the names of the kings who built or who ordered building this building, and the god to whom it was dedicated, and some other information telling us what kinds of tools and instruments were used in these buildings, in the great buildings. They were putting this in special corners.
In the four corners?
In the four corners.
So it was, in fact, most of the important buildings had foundation deposits in them, certainly temples.
Temples, pyramids, palaces, and shrines for the god or for the king.
Saunders believes Shishak knew the stones from the Ark were sacred and placed them in the foundation of one of his own temples.
He would have thought that, we've got the shrine of their god, let's take the stones or whatever is inside that offering and put it in our temple deposit, in our foundation deposit.
If he did, Saunders believes, these priceless biblical relics, the actual stones God gave Moses on Mount Sinai, might remain today precisely where Shishak buried them nearly 3,000 years ago. The ancient city of Luxor, on the banks of the Nile. Across the river is the Valley of the Kings, with tombs and monuments of many of Egypt's greatest pharaohs. The next stage of Saunders' search is to find out more about the pharaoh referred to in the Old Testament as Shishak. Written on these walls are the histories of the pharaohs, but with virtually all the great Egyptian kings represented here, there is no mention of a pharaoh named Shishak. In fact, most scholars agree there never was a pharaoh named Shishak. Saunders, though, is undaunted and thinks he's discovered the discrepancy. Shishak, it turns out, is the Hebrew name given an Egyptian king in the Old Testament. It's not an Egyptian name at all. But Saunders must still answer the question, exactly which pharaoh was Shishak? Here, Saunders' theory could rewrite hundreds of years of ancient history. For centuries, it's been believed the pharaoh referred to in the Bible as Shishak was the 22nd dynasty king known as Shoshank. He too invaded the Holy Land, and many felt the similar sounding names made a strong case. But Saunders isn't so sure. Once again, the clue he needs would be found in the Bible itself. In the biblical account of Shishak's campaign, his army invaded only the southern part of the kingdom of Judah, leaving the northern territory, known as Israel, untouched. All the other Egyptian pharaohs had attacked both north and south.
So we have to look for an Egyptian king who never attacked the north, but was powerful enough to attack the south. If you go through the list of all the major Egyptian kings who ever left Egypt, you have Thutmose, who invaded the north. You have Ramases II, who invaded the north. You have Shoshenq, who invaded the north. He did not invade the south. If you go through all those Egyptian kings, you're left with only one powerful Egyptian king who only attacked the south, and that is Ramases III. It looks as though Ramases III is Shishak.
Saunders is convinced he has identified the man who invaded the Holy Land and looted Solomon's temple. He is now certain that the original raider of the Lost Ark was the Pharaoh Ramases III. Today, Saunders is about to meet the legendary Pharaoh face to face. Museum authorities are intrigued by Saunders' theory that Ramases III is Shishak and have agreed to show him something so extraordinary it rarely sees the light of day.
Now we are going to see one of the most famous pharaohs in our history.
So that's Ramases III.
This is Ramses III.
He's remarkably well preserved, isn't he?
Yes, he is in very good condition, as you see.
Do we have any idea how old he might have been when he died from the mummy himself rather than from the historical record?
Our information is very little about his actual age, but you can say he's around 40 from these x-rays and from the thickness of the bones, so the whole body.
If only mummies could speak, what a tale they could tell of how that ark was captured.
Meeting the long-dead Pharaoh has given new hope to Saunders' quest to find the Ark of the Covenant and the holy tablets of stone.
There's no question that the discovery of the stones would be the most profound archaeological and even political discovery, not only of the decade, the century, but the millennium.
If Ramases III really was Shishak, where might he have stashed the loot? Could Mike Saunders be one step closer to actually finding the lost Ark? Throughout history, many great leaders in many cultures left magnificent legacies. Egyptian pharaohs outdid them all. Medinit Habu, the magnificent mortuary temple of Ramases III. Mike Saunders has dared to rewrite centuries of ancient history with the bold hypothesis that the biblical pharaoh known as Shishak was, in fact, Ramases III. Here, Saunders hopes to pick up the trail that will lead him to the great king's most remarkable plunder, the Ark of the Covenant and the tablets bearing the 10 Commandments. Professor Mohammed Saleh has offered to guide Saunders around the site. Ramases III was one of ancient Egypt's last great warrior kings. His 31-year reign saw almost constant invasion and conquest of Egypt's neighboring lands. Among so many images of spoils from these conquests, one prize seems to stand out above all the rest.
I'm here in one of the inner chambers of the mortuary temple of Ramases III. And the most exciting for me and most interesting part is this wall where there is a golden box and it's being carried on golden poles. And above that golden box is a solar representation with wings. And it doesn't take too much of a stretch of the imagination to see that that golden box was the Ark of the Covenant, carried just as the Bible says on 2 golden poles. And above it, winged cherubim, exactly like the cherubim in the Bible.
According to the Bible, the Ark of the Covenant was crowned with 2 winged creatures, known as cherubim. Saunders believes he's made a major breakthrough. He claims he's the first to connect these images to Solomon's great temple in Jerusalem and the Ark of the Covenant.
There's one here, one over there, further down, extra ones. This whole chamber seems to somehow be dedicated and representing where Ramasees III obtained his treasure and obtained the ability to build probably the most magnificent temple in all of Egypt.
Saunders believes Medinet Habu was built by Ramasees in honor of Solomon and his great temple at Jerusalem. He also suggests it's probable the Ark itself may have been brought this far, a glorious golden spoil of war, displayed triumphantly and perhaps later melted down for the gold. But no one really knows. But what of its divine contents? The tablets God gave Moses on Mount Sinai. Medinet Habu was built decades after the looting of Jerusalem. Saunders believes it's unlikely Ramasees would have held on to the holy stones for so long, then buried them here. Saunders thinks it's more likely Ramasees would have buried the stones much earlier. So Saunders must now find one of the Pharaoh's monuments built closer to the time he plundered Jerusalem. Once again, the ancient records are scoured for fresh clues. Written by Ramasees' sons, the so-called Harris Papyrus recorded all of the great king's achievements. Amid the impressive chronicle, one anomaly has gone virtually unnoticed for millennia.
What stood out to me was the fact that Ramasees III had built a temple outside of Egypt, which is not a normal occurrence for the Egyptian kings, in a place called Vahi Pakanan.
And there was another clue. The papyrus reveals that this unusual temple was built by Ramasees III at the site where he received a consignment of treasure from the kingdom of Judah.
For the Egyptian king to build a temple outside of his domain, purposefully just to receive the tribute, it must have been a massive tribute.
According to Saunders, the most likely source of this massive tribute was Jerusalem's sacred treasure, the contents of Solomon's temple, including the Ark of the Covenant. With a candidate for the temple identified, Saunders needs to find the modern location of the temple at Vahi Pakanan.
Very simply, I had asked my wife to go to the Times Atlas of the World, look in the index, and see if there was any Zahi, D-J-A-H-I, anywhere in the index. And she comes back to me and she says, well, there is a Djaharya that looks similar, D-J-A-H-I. Will that do? I said to her, well, absolutely, let's find out where this place is. At which point, amazingly, my hairs at the back of my head jumped up, because Djaharya on the atlas was at exactly the spot where an Egyptian king would stop his armies if he were marching from Egypt to Jerusalem.
Could this be the breakthrough Saunders has been looking for? If his theories are correct, then finding this temple could also mean finding the actual 10 Commandments. Finding the Ark of the Covenant and the 10 Commandments has haunted man for nearly 3,000 years. From crusading knights to the son of Solomon and Sheba. From Temple Mount to the Well of Souls, theories abound, but hardcore evidence has always proven elusive. Is Mike Saunders finally on the trail of the Ark's divine contents? The temple Ramasees built outside Egypt would be the key. Djaharya was the natural place for an Egyptian army to camp after crossing the desert, before the terrain becomes treacherously steep and the army would be vulnerable to attack. That would also make this town the logical site for Ramasees to build a temple after his great conquest.
If the temple is there, the foundation deposits of the temple would still be there, and the stones may very well be found in the temple deposits in that village.
But fighting over the Holy Land doesn't just belong to Bible history. Djaharya is situated on the Middle East's most active political fault line, the West Bank. Control of this area was only recently handed over by Israel to the Palestinian Authority. And satisfying biblical curiosity is not high among Djaharya's priorities. The Palestinian Ministry of Antiquities and Archaeology has given Saunders permission for a preliminary survey in Djaharya, but they can't guarantee his safety.
The children still stone cars. We hope they won't stone us. But in any adventure, there's some danger, and one has to face that. This is much too important a quest to worry about any dangers that might be there. There's the sign. Here we are, after all this time. Because how many people live here now?
About 18,000 people, that's all.
It's a bustling little town.
There's a good market here for the Bedouins who are coming from the south.
Yes. Everybody comes from the desert. The first place they come to is Djaharya.
That's right.
So that hasn't changed in 3,000 years.
Saunders' search will not be an easy one, even assuming he is correct, and this is where Ramasees built his temple. After thousands of years, it's possible no trace remains of that ancient monument. But Saunders' hunches are adding up. Evidence suggests Djaharya is the site where Ramasees camped and built his temple.
The Egyptian army would come from the south here, build this temple, and it overlooked the whole of the Hebron Hills, as far as the eye can see. It's a wonderful place to put a temple.
New evidence, building stones that suggest they come from an important ancient monument.
You can see a lot of this stuff has been reused, and it's all from different periods. Look, you see these holes?
Yes.
Here, look at how nicely squared off that is. There's one over there with holes. There's one here with holes. And then there's all this other rubbish. Look at this.
Different
Very nice.
pieces.
Look, finish, the finish on here.
Yes.
It's perfectly shaped, perfectly straight on the edges. Against, look at all this other stuff that they built ordinary fortresses with. I mean, this is what they used to build fortresses. They spent a lot of time and effort in cutting that stone. There was a special building here.
Everywhere Saunders looks, he finds evidence there was once an important ancient structure here.
I mean, this lintel, for example, is obviously much older, was cut a lot earlier, and was broken before it was actually put into place. I don't think we can yet say that any of the stones are Egyptian, but they're certainly older than this building.
When he came to Djaharya, Saunders was concerned there'd be nothing left of any ancient buildings. Now he has the opposite problem. With so many ruins and so much rubble, how will he ever find the foundation of one ancient Egyptian temple? More than 160 years ago, an American explorer named Edward Robinson passed through Djaharya and described the ruins of an ancient fortress-like tower. Could Robinson have seen the last standing remains of Ramasees' great temple? Robinson's tower was said to have one distinctive feature, an enormous, perfectly crafted 9-foot stone. Finding one particular stone amid so much rubble is next to impossible, but Saunders finally finds the next best thing, someone who claims to know where it is.
Perhaps he would know where that 9-foot-long stone is. We want to know where the biggest stone of all the villages.
هو بيسألك وين في هان في المبنى هذا القديم أو في البلدة القديمة أكبر الأحجار الكبيرة اللي تقريبا طولها 3 متر.
اسمها الحسن.
الحسن؟ وين هي الحسن؟
هذه هان جنب الصحراء.
طب شو يعني الحسن؟ شو يعني؟
هذه زي كنيسة قديمة يعني.
I want to translate now. He's talking that he thinks that it will be in the Hassan. Hassan means in English fortifications. He says a number is about 3,000 years ago.
Good. Now, where is it? Let's go. We want to go and see it. Where is it?
He thinks that's over there.
This one. It's quite large.
But it's not enough.
No, it's not enough, but it's big. There's a nice large cut stone here, but not 9 foot.
No.
We're looking for the 9-footer. You see, these came for a different building. Look at this.
See this?
These came from a different building. Look, here we go. Here we go.
Yes.
There it is.
Finding the 9-foot stone is an exciting discovery. It could be the breakthrough that reveals the location of the temple Ramasees built 3,000 years ago.
This wall is absolutely incredible in comparison to the rest of the village. Everything else has been reused. Why? Because it's practical for builders to reuse small blocks of stone. When you're building a house, when you're building a fortress, you build in normal size blocks. It's only when you build something that is dedicated to a god that has some special spiritual significance that you use something out of the ordinary. And there is a 9-foot-plus block of stone. Nobody in their right mind would spend time taking that block and putting it in their house or putting it in a fortress. And they're obviously in their original position. Nobody's ever moved them. They were built specially for this building. And this is not a fortress. This is something special. This is it. Now, this was put on later.
That's right.
This is rubbish.
That's right.
All right?
That's right.
This is where it was.
Saunders believes he's located part of the original building. What's more, one of its corners, where a foundation deposit would be buried, is accessible.
And the wonderful, wonderful, wonderful thing about this is nobody has touched it since it was built.
I see that.
Nobody's removed that stone. If this was built by an Egyptian, there will be a foundation deposit under there.
Could this be the final piece in the puzzle? Are the sacred stone tablets God gave Moses on Mount Sinai buried here? Mike Saunders believes he's found the site where the sacred contents of the Ark of the Covenant are buried, below the monument Ramases III built to celebrate his great victory over the Israelites. Now, though, he needs permission from the Palestinian Minister for Antiquities and Archaeology to dig under the cornerstone. Time is an approximate commodity in the Middle East. After a 2-hour wait, Saunders is told the minister won't be able to see him for at least 2 days. Saunders uses the delay to revisit Djaharya. With him is Israeli geophysicist Yuri Basson, who has brought the latest in subsurface radar scanning technology. Now they can search for a cavity under the wall without digging.
This bottom corner is where I think a foundation deposit may lie. So we need your advice and your help. How do we find out whether there's a cavity below that corner?
We have to clean a little bit, especially to take the metals out of here, because the signal is affected from metals. It is even good that we have this kind of slope, that this ground is sloping in this way, because we want to look at an angle just underneath the wall.
Yes.
Okay, so it is perfect.
Let's do it.
Okay. I mark the corner. I will proceed now. Okay, we finished this profile. Let's go to the point that I think that something is found there.
Sure?
Yeah. Something. I think this is the location. You see the turn here, a curvature here. I see evidence to a strong anomaly, which can be a cavity. It's located on 2.3 meters from our start position, which is here. Just keep in mind that these results are initial, and we did not do any sophisticated signal processing, but still we see major anomaly here.
The radar anomaly could be a cavity, but its location doesn't fit Saunders' theory. It's a few yards in from the cornerstone, where a foundation deposit should be buried. But Yuri hopes more evidence will turn up when he processes the data more carefully back in the lab. Confident there is something to dig for, Saunders returns for his delayed meeting with the minister.
Stuff here, we have to go to the museum. So Sami knows the way. Yes, we can go.
Down in the top, down inside.
The minister has stood him up again, but Saunders learns where he has gone and gives chase. Still no luck. By the time Saunders arrives at the museum, the minister's already moved on. Finding the Ark of the Covenant almost seems simple compared with meeting the minister. Instead, Saunders visits Yuri's lab for more detailed results from the radar scan.
Mike, I think I have a little surprise for you. Look, we found a second anomaly. It looks as if it is a cavity. Just underneath the corner.
Under the corner?
Under
the corner?
Under the corner, yes.
Exactly where they used to put foundation deposit.
This is the anomaly that we saw in the field. And
underneath which was
underneath about 2.5 meters at a depth of about 1.5, 1.6 meters. But after I processed the data at the office, all of a sudden this anomaly came up.
Amazing.
Okay? And the depth of the anomaly is roughly about 3 meters, and it might be cavity.
Is there any way of determining if there are any objects in that cavity?
Not now, no.
No.
It's not possible because it's too deep for this frequency to receive very detailed information.
At last, Saunders meets with the elusive Minister for Antiquities and Archaeology.
Bureaucratic nonsense, stupid buggers. We found the law now. Where did they find such a law? I don't know. We can't do any procedures. No scanning, no procedures. We had permission, and he said, well, it's nothing to do with the political establishment. Whatever they want, who cares? There's a law, there's an antiquities law. We need to make an application. We've got to have a scientific institution. We're going to have financial backing. All we want to do is dig 3 inches to find the foundation deposits. They want to make a big issue.
He's my boss, and I can't do nothing. I have to accept his orders.
And there's nothing we can do today.
Like so many archaeologists working in this politically charged area, Saunders has hit a roadblock just when he believes he's on the brink of a breakthrough. He's certain now that he's made a significant discovery, finding the remains of an important ancient structure and discovering a tantalizing cavity under one of its corners, suggesting the wall was built by ancient Egyptians. If the cavity contains Egyptian foundation deposits, he will have proof of a previously unknown Egyptian temple built outside Egypt, in itself a major contribution to ancient history.
I'm absolutely convinced that if the 2 cavities are opened, we will find evidence that Ramases III built that temple.
Whether the 10 Commandments lie buried here, no one can say. But the trail of clues has brought him so far and revealed so much. Saunders is determined to gain permission to dig and prove his theory once and for all.
I can't give up. We're too close to what could be the most important discovery of our generation.
For now, though, Saunders' theory and the name Ramases III are added to the great tradition of art legends, including King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, the Crusades of the mysterious Knights Templar, and so many more. And yet, if it hasn't been found after all this time, could that be what the God of the Old Testament wanted for the location of the Ark to remain a mystery forever?